Welcome back to the shop. In this episode, we're going to be repairing and recarving a broken leg on a decorative side chair. We've got an upholstered chair that needs a little bit of repair. As you can tell, this leg is missing. I have half the leg. So our work in the shop today is going to be gluing on a walnut block and recarving it to match the profile on this leg, and then gluing it back on. We'll also do a little bit of upholstery work just to get this back together, and probably a little bit of touch-up work on the legs as well. So follow along and see how we'll repair this chair. Our first operation is going to be to get this perfectly smooth so we can actually glue on a walnut block to here. So I'm going to use the disc belt sander. I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure as I run it just to smooth that, but careful not to sand down the base of the bottom of the leg. All right, we've got the bulk of it smooth, sanded down nice and smooth. So we should be able to glue on a block of walnut here and make that repair. The important thing to note is the grain direction. So the grain direction on this is going up. So it's going to be important that we follow that same grain direction when we glue that block on. Using the other leg as the sample to build from, we know that this section of the leg has to be 2 1/4 inches long, so we're going to come out 2 1/4 this way, and then we need to come down right about 2 1/16, 2 1/8 down this way. So the block is going to glue on right here. So I've got a piece of walnut slab that's plenty thick enough that we're going to be able to cut a square out of this and then cut it to shape, and a rough shape, and get it glued onto here, and then we'll shape it once we get it fastened on. With our block cut to the rough size, we've got the profile traced on the edge of the block. We're now going to go through the bandsaw and cut out of that line so we can shape it afterwards. But we'll get it very close to the line to get the approximate shape that we're looking for. This is a pretty thick piece. It's a thin blade, but I think you should be able to handle it without any problems. So we now have the rough shape that we're going to need to glue on. And what we'll do is we'll shape this afterwards with some rasps and some files and probably a spoke shave, definitely to clean up the tool marks, but we're getting there. One of the most difficult things when gluing curved pieces is how do you clamp it? So this has been a little bit of time figuring out the best way to clamp this. And I'm using some Type 1-2 glue to glue this up. And what I've done, and I'll give you a complete walkthrough of it, but what I've done is I've clamped the leg to the bench, clamped a block of wood across the curvature on the side, and then I'm going to put another block this way. And really what it's overcoming the curvatures of the leg when you're applying the clamp pressure, because you want to make sure you get good clamp pressure when you're gluing. So we've got our block cut, and I'm just applying some Type 1-2 glue here. And I'm doing that to both sides. And then we'll apply our clamps. I typically like to let all my glue ups sit overnight to give time for the glue to actually cure before doing any additional work to it. And particularly for this, we're going to be carving on the sides so that we don't want the glue to let go. So once you get the glue on, it gets very slippery. So we're going to try this glue up and we'll see how we go. I did do a dry fit beforehand just to make sure it was going to work. And I know what my alignments need to be. And we'll get it close with the clamps. Then we'll just use a hammer to tap it into alignment if we need to. So we know we're down. Oh, that was a good push down. Now, we need to tap it forward. All right, that is good and solid. So this was somewhat of a complicated glue up. So this is the block that we were gluing on. And what I've done is I glued the leg straight down to the bench, put a big block on this side to accommodate the curvature of the leg, and then put another block here, clamped across, and then downward pressure. As you can see, I got good glue squeeze out across all sides. You'll also notice that I put some packing tape on the bench so that it wouldn't glue to the bench. So this block is clamped to here, and we're going to let this sit overnight, and fingers crossed it'll come out exactly where we want to, and then we'll do some carving to the legs. With the glue up complete, we bring the leg over to the disc and belt sander to get a rough shaping of the leg. And it's a back and forth between the disc and the belt to get that curvature to match the mating leg on the other side. Now that we have the rough shape, we bring it over to the bench and we use a series of wood rasps to do the final tuning to get the appropriate shaping that we want. And this is a very gentle process. We use the rough rasp, then we use a finer rasp, and go back and forth to get that final curvature that we're looking for and to make sure the joint lines up perfectly with the face of the leg. We'll then do some sanding, and then our next step is going to move on to actually carving the scroll work back into the leg. Again, we're using the mating leg to get the outline of the scroll work that we want. So I just use some blue masking tape, cut it to the curvature of the leg, and then I'll flip it over to get the reverse profile, and we'll bring that over to the leg and pencil sketch out the curvature that we want for that scroll work. Using our template as the guide, we pencil sketch out the scroll work, and then we'll move on to the carving chisels to begin the carving effort. Using some small carving chisels, I carved out the scroll work on the leg, and I got it to where I wanted it to be, but then when I brought the leg over to the chair, I noticed that my curvature was a little bit off, so I wound up bringing the leg back to the disc sander and rounding it just a little bit more and doing some more profile work with the rasps. Then, rather than using the hand chisels, I actually used a Dremel tool with a very fine tip and very quickly carved the scroll work that I needed. And then this was the finished product of our carving. So you first see the original and then the new profile. So we've got a pretty good match. So now our next step is going to go along to tint up some shellac and blend in our repair so we can completely make it disappear. Off camera, I used some Type Bond 2 glue and glued the leg back onto the chair. Now we move on to the touch-ups. With our repair complete, what I've done is I've given a light sand on this leg with 220 grit sandpaper, and then I've tinted some shellac with some burnt sienna and some burnt umber to get the tone to match the rest of the legs. So now I'm just using an artist brush, and I'm going to do my touch-ups to blend in that color across all the legs. And it may take a couple of coats in order for this to happen, because what shellac does, it builds. So I'm building the color as I go through with the touch-ups. So we'll let that sit now for about 10 minutes for the shellac to dry, and it's alcohol based, so it dries very quickly. And then we'll come back and we'll hit that with a 600 Scotch-Brite pad just to smooth it out a little bit. And then get another coat of the shellac on there in order to get that color match that we want. I'm going to go through now and touch up the rest of the legs. And then by the time I'm done with that, I'll come back and I'll put another top coat on top of this. All right, that has had time to dry. And I hit it with some Scotch-Brite pad to take out any marks. And then we're going to come back now and put one final touch-up on the shellac to get the complete color match we want. And it's actually blending pretty well here. There's a light spot here that'll go a little bit heavy. But overall, she's blending in very nicely. I'm going to shake up my mix here and make sure my dyes are mixed together. And just following the grain pattern, applying this last top coat of shellac. And then once this is done, I will buff it out with some 4/0 steel wool just to knock down the sheen of the shellac. And then throw a quick coat of wax on it. But overall, this is blending in very nicely across the entire leg. Get a good color match across the 4 legs. We'll let this dry. We'll buff it with some 4/0 steel wool. And then we'll bring it back to the customer. I appreciate you following along. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please comment below. If you'd like to learn more about how I mix shellac or how we tint the shellac to get the tones, please drop a comment below. And if there's some interest, I'll create a specific video just on that topic. But thanks for joining us at A.G. Johnson & Son Furniture Restoration.